to Soda City Unleashed, where we decode pet health here in Columbia, South Carolina. My name is Emily White, and today I'm so excited to introduce you guys to Alexis Hoffman. Alexis is our Director of Human Resources at CVETS, and she's here for May Mental Health Month. Welcome, Alexis.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get to CVETS?
So I actually started off as a unit manager at Waffle House. So definitely did not start off in the vet med world, but always knew that I wanted to be in human resources. I am a second generation. My mom has been in human resources her entire career.
Love that.
So it was just a natural next step for me.
Compassion flows down the familial line.
Yes, and actually, if you consider that, then I'm a third gen because grandma was a social worker. So
incredible.
Yep, it's in my blood. Always had a passion for animals. So when I saw this opportunity open up, it just seemed like a natural next step to tie in everything I'm passionate about in one place. So I'm just very happy to be here.
That's awesome. And you are from Columbia, is that right?
Yes, born and raised in Lexington, right outside of Columbia. Went to USC, go Cox, for my undergrad, and then Charleston Southern for my master's. So I have never moved too far away.
Gotcha. That's awesome. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So we wanted to talk about May being Mental Health Awareness Month. Vet Med has, we talk about that a lot. It's a very strenuous line of work and physically and mentally. So one of our priorities at CVETS is to always keep our employees happy and healthy and be there for them when they need it. So we know the statistics in vet med can be heavy. From an HR perspective, why is May such an important checkpoint for a high intensity environment like emergency vet med?
Yeah, great question. And honestly, just want to shout out CVETS for even having the awareness. I was really excited to be invited on the podcast this month to talk about this specifically because, like you said, it is very common in the field, and it is something that I don't think is talked about enough. The reason that May is such an important checkpoint for us is because it gives us an intentional time to actually pause and look around, because vet med professionals are very resilient people and oftentimes to a fault. So what that means is they're just going to keep working long past the point of them actually being burnt out. So when we identify May as, yes, this is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we make an intentional effort to stop and look around, it gives leaders of the organization the opportunity to say, hey, are we providing support? Do we have systems in place? What resources are available? Do employees know they're available? Are they easily accessible? And it just gives us a reminder to actually stop and look at those things instead of just trucking through until there's an issue.
Absolutely. Because by the time there's an issue, sometimes it could be too late. Right?
Oh, oftentimes it is. Yeah.
So burnout doesn't always look like someone quitting, right? So what are some of the more subtle yellow flags you look for that suggest a team member might be struggling mentally?
Yeah, great question. Like you said, burnout typically doesn't start with somebody walking in my office and saying, I'm done. And this is where we really lean on middle management to be familiar with their teams, because a lot of times some of the yellow flags that you're talking about can look like increased irritability, people calling out more often, a previously engaged employee who's usually showing up a certain way, suddenly detaching or being disconnected from their team. And those are indicators for us that, hey, this person isn't showing up how they usually do. Let's see what's going on. And people, of course, could have just something going on in their personal life, but when you're close enough with your team as their direct leader to recognize that, hey, this person isn't showing up how they usually do, then it kind of earmarks the opportunity for you to step in and just make sure that they're doing okay.
Absolutely. That's a good point. It's having those, like you said, middle management or like just the team leads, or even, in my case, I work side by side with Paige, we do marketing together. So like checking in on her checking in on me, just making sure that the people around you are doing okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So vet med usually attracts perfectionists or high achievers. How do we shift the culture so that asking for help is seen as a professional strength rather than a weakness? Yeah,
great question. So I think that this all starts with what leadership exemplifies. So by that, I mean, if we identify the model employee as being somebody who is always picking up extra shifts and working late and never takes PTO and, is just super resilient and always active, then that shows the rest of the employees that vulnerability is a weakness. And so whenever we encourage employees to ask questions or take their PTO or, just have a different narrative around what a good employee looks like, I think that that's kind of where it all starts, because it's going to to trickle down from the top. And so when employees feel psychologically safe to admit that, hey, I'm not doing so well this week, and to lean on their team or to ask leadership for, maybe a different workload for that week or a different assignment for that week, I think that it really just depends on having that culture of psychological safety, and that has been exemplified from leadership and followed through with.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think if you look back maybe like 30, 40, 50 years ago, it's always been work. Like the harder you work, the higher you go. And only recently, I'd say in the past 10 years, it's been more of like, hey, mental health matters. Do you need a minute? Even like the idea of a mental health day, of just, taking a day of PTO. Maybe you're not necessarily sick, but like you just need a day. You need a minute to breathe. And that's okay. In this culture, that's invited.
Yeah, and not only for yourself, but it also protects the team and the patients. When you're not showing up at your best, then you're not going to be the best teammate, and you're not going to be the best provider of care. And that's when mistakes can start happening. And so it really is more beneficial to the organization for employees to be honest with themselves and to be honest with us whenever they do need a minute.
Absolutely. Yeah, good points. So beyond the posters in the break room and the little, blurbs we put in the newsletter, what are actual tangible resources that CVETS specifically provides or other places could provide to help staff manage their mental well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like there are a myriad of resources that can be provided. One thing that I feel is a little different that CVETS has started recently, we invited a medical social worker into the team at the beginning of the year, and that has been really instrumental in providing that in the moment emotional support, debriefing after difficult cases, setting up one-on-one sessions with employees who may need to have a little bit deeper conversation, but to have that direct access to somebody who is clinically trained and licensed to be able to help you, and she's on site full-time, immediately available to them. I think that has been something revolutionary for the field that's relatively newer, but that we've seen the direct impact it has on employees at CVETS. Aside from that, some other resources that are probably a little more common, but maybe less known, is most benefits companies offer some sort of free EAP or employee assistance program for employees that offers 24/7 access for any employee, whether you're enrolled in the medical benefits or not. That is very standard for any organization that offers medical benefits. And so I have found in my experience as an HR professional that a lot of employees don't even know they have access to that. And so even just communicating to the team, these are the resources that you have, this is what's available to you, and not just having cheesy posters in the break room, but this is actually something you can do. And also in looking into benefits that are available to employees at off hours. So that's another thing that is common in vet med, is working these kind of weird shifts. Does a night shift employee have the same access to resources as a day shift employee? And this is more talking about actual medical providers. So there are flexible provider options like telehealth that are available 24/7. So making sure that your medical plans have that benefit for your employees who work kind of weird hours, so that they have that immediate 24/7 access to a provider as well. And then some in-house stuff that you can take care of is manager training on emotional wellness, making sure that they're equipped with tools to be able to help their employees when they notice that something isn't right, that they're able to identify when something's not right, and also that they have the ability to cascade that information down to the employees. There is a responsibility to make sure that the people who have that direct impact, which would be that middle management that we've talked about, that they are qualified and equipped with the tools and resources that they would need.
Absolutely. And that they're comfortable enough with their staff to be able to say, like, hey, if you need this, come to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And also knowing when to escalate issues, like knowing when this is a little bit out of my realm, I need to call in the big dogs and send it on up to HR.
Absolutely. It's so interesting with our healthcare benefits, like the things that you can kind of dig in and find. Like I know something that we've discovered recently is our specific one at CVETS offers like a gym voucher membership type of thing. And everyone knows that endorphins are good for your mental health and staying active. So that's something that you can take advantage of and just do something for yourself with your benefits from your job. So definitely encourage everyone to look at their benefits really closely and see what they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those in leadership that may be listening, even them having the responsibility to dig in and see what's available to their employees and making sure that information makes it back down to the employee. Because I've actually found, again, as an HR professional with different organizations that I've worked with, that sometimes even members of management don't realize, what resources we have available that are free and already included with our medical plan. They just don't know that they exist. So benefits are usually where people glaze over in orientation. So I don't get offended when people are like, what? I've never heard that before. But it is something I'm very passionate about, because that's our one opportunity to give back to the employees who give us so much. So for the leaders who are listening to the podcast, would really encourage them to make sure that even they are aware of everything that they're already paying for with their benefits broker.
Absolutely. And you keep hearing more and more stuff too. I was talking to my mom this week actually about her dog, and she gets some kind of like stipend from her job that's for anything that they need, like medical, somewhat related. And so if her dog were to have an emergency or something, like she could use that money from work to. And then my sister works at a local hospital, and they give childcare vouchers for the employees that have children. But they've now started. Well, it's been a couple of years, but they now offer Rover vouchers too. So like they will help you let your dog out during the day if you're working a 12-hour shift. It's just really interesting how the benefits have stepped up to help.
Yeah, absolutely. People have gotten really creative with the benefits over the years, and I think we're all seeing the fruit of that now.
Yeah. Okay, so compassion fatigue versus burnout. We hear both. I know at CVETS we talk a lot about compassion. It's very important in what we do. So kind of explain to me compassion fatigue versus burnout. These terms get thrown around a lot. How do you help people distinguish between I'm tired from a long shift versus I'm emotionally depleted?
Yeah, so great question. And these can show up together. So I think it's fair that we do hear them kind of interchangeably, but there is an important distinction. So burnout is more in reference to operations. So think working long shifts, staffing, if you're short staffed, like feeling the burden of that, not taking PTO, that kind of thing, versus compassion fatigue is definitely more emotional. So that's when you're starting to feel checked out, numb, not empathizing with things that you would normally empathize with, or vice versa. Or on the flip side of that, being too emotional, crying super often when you wouldn't normally, you'd normally be able to like hold it together better than that, and just noticing a difference in your emotional health. So again, these two do often show up together, but they are different, and I think that we combat them in different ways. So with burnout, taking that mental health day would have a positive impact on how burnt out that you're feeling. However, with compassion fatigue, that's when you're going to want to lean more into the resources such as counseling or debriefing, more emotional related wellness services.
Gotcha. And would you say that HR or even if someone has a veterinary medical social worker on their staff, like are those people that you can go to kind of distinguish between the two? Is that a safe space?
Yeah, absolutely. And would definitely encourage employees to lean into that. Even management at some level should be able to kind of help you distinguish, hey, are you just overwhelmed because you've worked 12 days in a row and, the workload is heavy and that's getting to you and you just need a few days off? Or is this more of a psychological, like you're really getting numb and detached from the work that you're doing? Right. So yes, HR and a veterinary medical social worker would definitely be able to help you with that. But even if you're not comfortable going to HR, because I know that that's not always everyone's favorite place to be, even just talking to somebody that you trust and just kind of working through, like finding the root of the issue, because that's another thing that comes up is kind of once one thing gets to you, you start laying out everything that gets to you, and that's super valid, and just saying that out loud to somebody else that you trust who can kind of help you pick apart, like, hey, what's really the problem here, and get to the root of, do you just need a day off, or is it time to start talking to somebody for some help?
And I'd say something too that's changed a lot in the last probably 20 years is the stigma of going to therapy,
yes.
of actually talking to a professional. I know my parents' generation, it was always like, what? Why would you do that? Like that's for people who are sick. And it's just not true anymore. Like I would say I see a therapist bi-weekly, maybe a couple times a month. And I would say I'm a pretty mentally healthy person with a happy life. But it's still something that helps me get through every day. And it's not a weakness to say, hey, I need to just talk to a third party who's not involved, who can just hear me out, let me blab. that's not a weakness. That's an absolutely okay and wonderful thing to do for yourself.
No, I completely agree. I actually started seeing my therapist once a month, and now 3 years in, I see her biweekly. And that's not because I've experienced all this additional trauma and I need to see her for all these different reasons. It's because, like you said, it just helped me be a better human. It helped me show up better in all aspects of my life, not just at work. But you hit on a great point. Like, you don't have to see a therapist just because something's wrong or because you have a clinical diagnosis. I prefer to think of it more as like life coaching. You know, you can just kind of talk to them about what's going on, or if something is heavy on your mind, they can help you work through that too. So I agree. I definitely think that the stigma around that's changing, or at least I surely hope so. It's funny you say that, because about a year ago, I actually looked at my therapist and asked, I was like, you're not going to ever like fire me, right? Like there's never going to be a point where you tell me I have to stop coming, right? And she was like, no, we can meet as long as you'd like to. Right. And so that was also just really encouraging, but also kind of points out exactly what you're talking, that even myself and an individual who was already actively engaging in therapy still had this thought in the back of my head of like, okay, so when am I supposed to be done? And it was just really encouraging to know that, you know, it's a lifelong journey. You don't ever have to be done. That doesn't mean that you have to go to therapy forever either. You know, if you get to a day that you're like, you know what, that was good, and I think I got it from here, then cool, that's awesome too. For me, no, she's going to be hearing from me for a while.
Keep me on the books.
Right.
Yeah, that's funny you say that. I went to therapy last week, and at the end of the session, I was like, so I'm cured? And he was like, he was like, yeah, but you got to come back.
Right.
Like, okay. Mixed messaging here.
See you in 2 weeks.
right. So no, it's really beautiful how it's more widely accepted now, and just like, I'm like, you don't have a therapist? Like, let me give you my guy's number. Like,
right.
Let me get you, because it's I like the idea of thinking of life coaching too, because sometimes you just need that person who like doesn't know anyone in your life, doesn't know anyone you work with, like doesn't know anything, and they just sit and listen to you. And most insurance now covers that. So
for sure. And also jumping back to the EAP, most EAP programs will offer 3 to 6 free in-person sessions, and then unlimited virtual sessions. So I always like to throw that out, that, you know, to establish the relationship with the therapist, you do get the in-person sessions first, but you can have unlimited access to them thereafter. So just a little plug there, that if insurance isn't accepted, that you can still have access to those at free or very low cost through EAP.
Absolutely. Pro tip from a girly who's been in therapy: you might not love your very first therapist.
Great point.
That is something I feel like happens a lot. Someone will be like, oh, I tried it once, I didn't really click with my person, so I stopped trying.
Yes.
No, don't stop trying. I think I've had like 4 or 5 at this point, because sometimes like life changes and things change, and you just need a different perspective. And so keep going.
Yes, no, that is a great point. I also have been through, I don't think it's just 4 or 5. And also don't give up on the first try. You know, maybe it was just a weird day. Like, go back to them at least 1 or 2 times before you write them off. But yeah, don't stick with it if you're not feeling it. Find the person you vibe with. It's just like, it's kind of like dating, you know?
Right.
Just because you take them on a first date doesn't mean you got to take them on a second. But, you know, sometimes you just got to keep
up. Yeah.
Got to keep trying.
I love it. So we've talked a little bit about the mental health day. Can you tell me why there's often some guilt associated with calling out of a busy clinic, or what your message might be to an employee who feels like they might be letting their team down because they want to focus on their mental health?
Yes. So I think that this is very common, specifically in this industry, because anyone who's worked in vet med for more than 5 minutes knows that we get each other on a different level. And it's much different than any environment that I've ever been in. So there is a lot of that guilt that exists, because oftentimes if you're starting to feel burnt out or fatigued, then you know that your team is also probably experiencing that as well. And because these teams are so close-knit, they share those kinds of feelings with one another. So just like you said, they feel like they're letting their team down. However, I would really encourage folks to treat their mental health the same as they would their physical health. If you were physically sick and unable to perform your job, then you would stay home. So if you're mentally unwell and unable to perform your job at your best ability, then, you know, you should also stay home. And that kind of circles back to something we mentioned earlier about it being the best for the team and for the patient, because if you're not showing up your full self, that's when we start making errors. That's when that increased irritability happens and we start to have conflict. So sometimes it is better to just stay home. Now, in that same vein, what I, as an HR professional, would prefer to see, because of course last minute call outs they are inconvenient. I won't completely dismiss that and say, yeah, if you wake up and you need to call out, because I don't want to necessarily encourage that. So I would encourage instead for folks to try to plan intentional mental health days off. I understand that's not always the case. And of course, if there is an emergent need, like absolutely take care of yourself first. But even just giving yourself something to look forward to, I feel like that's something that's just so taboo. And actually something I've done for the first time recently was having PTO with no plans. So I have a week of PTO that I need to use for the summer, and in June I'm taking a week off, and no, I'm not doing anything. And that seems so weird even to me just as I'm saying it here out loud, but I'll use that time to catch up on stuff around the house and just, whatever I want to do. If I want to sleep all day or read or whatever, and so encouraging others to also, even if that's just like taking one day and giving yourself like a long weekend, whatever. I say weekend sparingly because maybe your weekend isn't Saturday and Sunday, but just giving yourself kind of an extended time off, even if that's not a whole week. And kind of giving yourself like that light at the end of the tunnel, something to look forward to. And when you plan it ahead of time, then the team is able to staff accordingly, and then you're not leaving your team in a crunch. So that being said, again, I don't want to minimize the mental health day for emergent situations, because obviously that is also what it's there for. But that's where I would say it's important for managers, middle managers, or leadership at that level to have that relationship with the employee, where the employee feels psychologically safe to come forward maybe at the end of a hard shift and say, hey, I'm really tore up about that. That was really hard. I need tomorrow off, and it not be treated, as a bad thing, and where the employee feels safe speaking up for themselves and the manager's able to kind of figure it out for them.
And like you said, that really helps everyone in the long run, including the patients. So something that's really important to acknowledge here is, our audience, we're talking about vet med, right? So like you are very important because you get the job done. You're the one treating the patients, but we also need you to be there for the patients because they are there for a reason. So really looking out for your mental health, planning that day or taking the day that you need helps everybody.
Right.
So we've talked a lot about middle management and those people who, are looking out for their team and looking around them and making sure everyone's doing okay. How are we training those people, specifically at CVETS, to lead and to handle a mental health moment when it happens, like maybe in the middle of the day, in the middle of a chaotic surgery, maybe, we lose a patient or something? How are we helping those people to really commandeer those situations?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously in vet med, that's an industry where you have to be operationally sufficient in your knowledge, but they should also have that emotional intelligence training to be able to recognize when an employee is feeling escalated, or again, just having that relationship with your employee to see that, hey, something's not going right. And that can look different for everybody, but training them to recognize those things and then to kind of immediately intervene. So for example, in the middle of a busy ER shift, what that may look like is you see somebody and they're scrambling and they're, just kind of freezing up or freaking out, or maybe they're snapping at other people, and just inserting yourself, walking over and saying, hey, take 5, I got this. And just giving them a moment to step away and just kind of do some box breathing, come back down to themselves, and then rejoin the situation. Sometimes something as simple as that can really make or break an employee's day. Asking intentional questions, hey, what do you need from me? How can I help? And really throwing the ball in their court to say, hey, tell me what to do, like help me help you kind of thing, and then actually following through on it. So, if you're putting yourself in that position, make sure you have the 5 minutes for them to actually step away. Or if you're asking, what can I do, making sure that you actually have the ability to do the thing that they're saying that they need right in that moment. And so I think that a lot of that relies on leadership or myself to make sure that those middle level managers are trained on what that looks like in their realm, and how to de-escalate those situations appropriately, or escalate it on up if it is something that they're not qualified to handle or help with in that moment.
Absolutely. So a lot of people, I would say most people who get into vet med, they get into it because it's a calling, right? They absolutely love animals. They love that animals have people, and the people who have the animals, it's like a heart job.
Yes.
So how do we protect the joy of vet med? That is something that people come to work every day, excited to see these patients and these animals that we take care of. So how do we protect the joy of vet med, and what role does HR play in making sure the mission doesn't get buried under the stress?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a phenomenal question and something that I'm really passionate about, because I'm not medically trained. And so there's not a whole lot that I can do for them. But one thing I can do is try to protect that joy for them, by creating an environment where we're not forcing them to burn themselves out to be successful, and where the mission of the organization really is about protecting the employees and protecting that joy, not just pushing the agenda forward. And so what that can look like, some simple things that you can do is, number one, recognition. So something as simple as an Employee of the Month program means so much to people. I know a lot of leadership folks will kind of roll their eyes and be like, people don't care about that. But yes, they do. I mean, when you get to nominate your peers for Employee of the Month and they get, a small perk, it doesn't even have to cost anything. For example, CVETS, our perk for Employees of the Month, they get an extra day of PTO and a parking space right up front. That was super easy to do, and our employees eat it up. They love that recognition of like, hey, you're doing great, keep it up. We also send out the newsletter, which has the opportunity for you to send in shout outs, and every single week, it never fails, there are always multiple shout outs from all over the hospital of just, hey, this person placed their first PIC line, or hey, this person jumped in and helped out when it was needed, or hey, this person covered a shift for me when my baby was sick, thank you so much. And just having a space where people can just call each other out and in a loving way and say, you know what, thank you so much. It doesn't happen enough. And sometimes because we are in such a high volume, fast paced environment, we don't have the opportunity to say it right then, because unfortunately we're just having to move on to the next thing. And so having that dedicated space where once a week, that newsletter goes out and there's all this positive messaging in there. And it means a lot to the employees. I was shouted out one time and it made my month. I had no idea that I was going to get a shout out. I was relatively newer to the organization, and I rode that high for a while. And so I know if it meant so much to me, I can only imagine how much that would mean to an overnighter who doesn't really get a lot of interaction with leadership to see that they got shouted out on something that they did well. So little things like that are just very easy to implement. Also team connection. So teams, having those closer relationships with what I would call your immediate work family. Supporting growth. This is one that I also feel like is fairly easy. Knowing your employees well enough to know, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I know that's a silly thing to say, as an adult, but really sometimes we're still kind of figuring out, if they're currently an emergency tech, but their goal is to be in surgery, we should know that about our employees and to be seen and to know what your goals are and then to help them get there. If that's their goal, well, hey, let's outline what that looks like. We have a need in surgery. That's awesome. I would have never known if I didn't ask. And so just seeing your employees as human and engaging with them in that way, and helping them get where they want to be, I think that is also just a way to help protect their joy in the field.
You spend your day taking care of the people who take care of the pets, right? So you are doing human resources stuff all day. What do you do to protect your own mental health while carrying the weight of kind of everyone else's stuff?
Great question. And this is the part of the interview where I kind of giggle and say easier said than done. So I totally recognize that I can sit here all day long and give you all these pointers and all this advice, but it doesn't mean anything unless action is behind it, right? So for me, what that looks like is not absorbing things personally, and having appropriate boundaries around kind of what I take home with me, which again, I'm human resources, so I'm not touching pets, I'm not interacting with clients in those vulnerable moments. So that's probably easier for me to do than for somebody who's looking a patient or a client in the eye who's having to put down their best friend. So I will say that having some sort of boundary around that is very important to be able to meet them in that spot. Boundaries are incredibly important. Debriefing after a difficult interaction is incredibly important. That's something that I try to do as well with appropriate parties, that are privy to that information in my role. And also having a good support system outside of work. I think sometimes we try to lean a little too hard on the people who are also facing the same issues that we are. And unfortunately, we get into this dialogue of just negativity and complaining, whereas somebody outside of work can actually offer you support and solutions. And then also just trying to partake in some of the advice that we give our employees, taking PTO, for example, or disconnecting when possible. So being in HR, I do have to be available 24/7. If there's a work incident or something that I need to come in for, then I have to be available. But I do have kind of like a block on my calendar for Sunday mornings for me to go to church and have the morning with my son. Right. That's super important to me, and that's something that helps me recharge and is fulfilling for me. So my team is aware of that, hey, from 8 to 12 on Sunday mornings, I'm unavailable and somebody else can step in. So yeah, I think that just having some practices that you're intentional about are really helpful for me anyways.
Absolutely. Good advice. So if someone is listening to this in their car before, say, a 12-hour shift and they're already feeling anxious about their workday, what's a small thing they can do today, right now, to prioritize themselves?
Yes. So whenever I have an employee in front of me, that's what I'm going to kind of come at this like this person sitting in front of me, and I'm giving them a heart-to-heart piece of advice. I'm a big fan of the 1%. And by that, I mean, every day there is something we can do to make our lives just 1% better. We're not going for perfect. We're not going for solving all the world's problems. Just today, what is that thing for me? And so sitting in your car, even if that means just taking a second after you've pulled in, turned the car off, you're sitting there in silence, maybe do some box breathing, some deep ins and outs, and then say, what is one sustainable thing I can do for this shift that will make me feel good? And so for me, that might look like, hey, no matter how today goes, as long as I get this one presentation done, that is a successful day. And so defining success by just like one thing instead of it having to be a whole perfect 12 hours, because I'm sorry, I think we all know by now that's probably not going to happen. So setting myself up by kind of recalibrating my expectations and also focusing on my locus of control. What is one thing Alexis can do to make today 1% better for myself? So applying that to the floor level, if you haven't been able to take your normally scheduled lunch for 2 weeks because we're short-staffed and incredibly busy, which unfortunately is kind of the nature of the beast, but for today, like that is your burning platform. That is what's really been eating you up inside, to have that psychologically safe environment with your leader to be able to go and say, hey, I know that this is a tall order. Is there any chance that just for today we can try to make sure I get my lunch? And I feel like if you're just asking that, like just for today, this would really mean a lot to me to make this shift go smoothly. I think they can make that happen, and so just defining what that looks like for you. Or, hey, I'm going to have one difficult client interaction and my goal is before they leave, they're going to like me. I was a server for many years and there were several times where a difficult table would come in, and instead of like just rolling my eyes and providing bare minimum service, I was like, no, you're gonna like me. Like that is, by the end of this interaction, you might not tip me, but I'm gonna make you smile, and I made that my challenge instead of letting that weigh me down for the rest of the day. So again, that can be very different for everyone. So I know that's kind of vague for advice, but
the 1%.
To just take a second to what's the 1%, and by the end of the year, that's 365%.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so when you look back, you'll realize, oh my gosh, in January, I was asking for a lunch break. By the end of the year, that's going to look a lot different, because you're going to realize that your priorities kind of change and your resilience is increasing each day as you're thinking of what your 1% is. It's going to get more impactful.
I love that. 1%. And then by the end of the year, you've tripled it. That's great. Cool. Well, Alexis, thank you so much for coming and sharing about Mental Health Awareness Month. May is very important. We should practice mental health awareness every day of the year.
Yes.
But we really appreciate you coming and sharing some of your hot tips, and hopefully people get a lot out of this episode.
Well, yeah, no, thank you so much. This has been an honor. I'm glad to be able to come on and talk about this. And I will shamelessly go ahead and plug for anybody who may be in crisis, the Not One More Vet. They are always available specific to the vet industry for those who are in a moment of crisis and may need someone to talk to. There's also the suicide prevention hotline, 988. So for those of you who are maybe past the point of the conversation we're having today, please don't hesitate to reach out. I just can't overstate how impactful this industry is and how much everyone means to me. So shameless plug. Thanks for having me.
We'll definitely put those in the show notes too for people to easily access.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, until next time, give your pets an extra pet from us, and thank you for joining us for Soda City Unleashed.